Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. So first thing I would like to talk about is Communications 101. And impart a few tips, minus this, if you could turn the screen off so it's no longer existence or considered an option.
Would you like a table?
Sure. Table I'll take. That's the highest technology we can handle right now. So, the first thing is, how are we directing ourselves when we go out for the MSF in public? What's our most important tool when we go out, would you say? Yes?
Radar?
Yeah, okay. Definitely as an element of interacting with people. But for the sake of this seminar, go ahead.
I said radar.
A radar. I'm going to say the tongue. Because this very brief seminar is about communications. And so our tongue is our rudder. And there's a way in which, however we use our tongue, wherever we may be, is going to direct the outcome. And so it's really important to know some principles and techniques of how to use the tongue properly, and it will serve well, and not just for the MSF, but in all aspects of our life. And here, first of all, I'm going to talk about principles. Do you like this way of doing PowerPoint? So the first point that I've always felt helps me is to speak to the soul. And this is recommended in the Sri Upanishad. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmani ivanu pashyati sarvabhutesh chatmanam tatunavi jugupsate. This word anupashyati means to follow in the footsteps of what the Shastra is saying, to understand what's out there in the world. And the Shastra talks about, for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridashara junatishtiti brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra rudrani maya. A couple points here. Krishna says that I accompany every living entity. So he's actually when you look at a human being, you can look around, there's a few here. See if you find any humans. Yeah. These humans are the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's rather shocking, actually, that God's right there, and He's there within the heart. And so people come, like I saw these two very pious ladies come this morning to the temple. They're so sincere, Krishna loves them so much. They find their way through the jungle of Brooklyn just to find this place. I don't know where they parked, but they, had a baby in a stroller. They didn't know where to put their shoes. At the time, there wasn't a reception, but, they found their way and say, where's the temple? And I said, here, right here, please come in. And, they're very dear to Krishna. But all the living entities are, but especially humans, because humans have such a potential. And this is in the 11th canto in Krishna's instructions to Uddhava. He said that of all the different species, my favorite are the humans, because of their potential to develop bhakti. And so anupashyati means to see every person as the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not that you have to imitate an Uttamadhikari and pretend that you're actually seeing the four-armed supersoul there. But anupashyati means you should see it through the eyes of Shastra and understand it and marvel in it and appreciate it. So when I'm talking to somebody, I can be aware of the fact that the soul is there within the body. And the body that I'm talking to is also Krishna's energy. And it's being directed ultimately by a higher authority. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimhudatma kartaham iti manyate. The people we see coming down the street who feel that they are self-sufficient, they don't need anything else. Actually, it's not true. They're fully dependent on Krishna at every second. They may have a sense about them that, I don't need you, I don't need anything, I especially don't need Krishna consciousness. But that's not true either. They're actually eternal souls, and the sweetest thing for them is Krishna consciousness. We should be really aware of that. And that means to understand really what is the existential situation of every living being and what is ours also. Because that gives us the wherewithal when we're dealing with people to remember we're speaking to a soul. We're not speaking to that person's advertisement of their false ego. Because everyone's out there advertising, this is what I am. And then they dress up, they look in the mirror and say, does this fit my brand? And who I'm portraying myself to be. So you can speak to the soul and you'll feel a kind of natural sense of alignment when you do that. And it's not that you have to use any particular nomenclature or when you're speaking to people, but if you remember that, you'll be well served. So the other point, its counterpoint or parallel point is speak from the soul. Remember when you're speaking that you are a soul and you're speaking to another soul. And if you stay off the bodily platform of life and remember that I'm actually an eternal servant of Krishna and I'm speaking to another eternal servant of Krishna, then they on a very subtle level will feel that alignment. How is everybody doing so far? Are you all comfortable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, the kind of vibration that comes from our mouths, that from our own tongues, or I should say the quality of the vibration that comes from our tongues, will be determined by our state of heart. Because sound, and the sound we speak, carries our consciousness. And have you ever had somebody say to you, I don't like your tone of voice?
No.
A spouse maybe? Or somebody, or mother, father. You say one thing, but then they pick up something else and they say, I didn't like the tone. Because living beings are very perceptive. They're tuned at a very high level. They resonate at a very high level. They can pick up subtleties. And they pick up subtleties. And the way in which to tune your voice so that it actually touches their soul is through the practice, especially of japa. You were bringing up, Mataji, about discipline this morning, or yesterday, last night, and how important it is. The discipline of japa is vital because when we learn to train, when we train our tongues to chant Hare Krishna and hear the vibration, and we feel Krishna's presence through the holy name, then we'll develop a kind of spiritual force, so that when we speak, that people will be able to respond spiritually, or they'll feel that presence of the spiritual energy, and it comes from our own practice in our own lives. In the Bhagavatam, Prithu Maharaj speaks about saffron mercy particles, and in the verse he says that when pure devotees speak, their sound vibration touches Krishna's lotus feet. And on Krishna's lotus feet there are saffron particles. And the speech of the pure devotee then becomes mixed with those saffron particles. That's why when you hear the speech of a person who's pure or becoming pure, you'll notice a difference in quality. So it's important to refine oneself in order to be a fit instrument to transmit transcendental sound. In fact, it's an admonition in the Shastra, Avaishnava Mukundgirnam Putam Hari Katam Ritam Shavanam Naivakartavyam Sarpochista Payoyata. This verse says that if somebody's just a business person and they're trying to teach Krishna consciousness, they're not actually devotees, but they're trying to teach about Krishna consciousness, then there'll be an adverse effect. The vibration that they're making, even though it may sound like Krishna consciousness, will actually be a little poisonous, especially if they have a bad intention. So Prabhupada talks about professional reciters of Bhagavatam, that there's a lot of them in Vrindavan nowadays. They just take it as a livelihood. And they get really good at it. They know how to memorize all kinds of stuff, and it's a very fancy presentation. But because their ultimate intention is materialistic, they're not trying to please Krishna. They're trying to make a livelihood. Therefore, the sound vibration is different. So remember saffron mercy particles. And another way that Krishna talks to us about the tongue is the austerities of speech. And this appears in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, your speech should be truthful, pleasing, beneficial, non-agitating, and that you should regularly recite the Vedas. These are the 5 austerities of speech that one should practice. And these, you'll get a good opportunity to practice everywhere, because there are opportunities regularly to tell the truth or not, to decide whether you want to say something pleasing or not, beneficial. I think I should think several times about whether I should say it, who does it actually benefit if I say it. It should be non-agitating. And we should regularly recite the Vedas. It means it's important for us to be reading the Shastras regularly. There's ways in which we can read and understand, and we should also recite the verses when we get a chance. In Sanskrit, it's nice to learn the verses. It's much easier than learning the English. But regularly reciting them has a beneficial effect on our spiritual lives and purifies the tongue. Now, before I go to the next section, I just want to see if you have any reflections. Anything you heard that you found useful at this point? Name one thing. You just keep that mic right over there. Go ahead.
I really like the point you made about how our japa tunes our voice, so that when we go out and speak to people, it's more effective.
Yeah, you get tuned up. Have you ever had a chance where you go out and then it sounds like, everything you're saying is just missing the mark? Or the opposite might be there. That whatever you're saying, it just seems to fit just right. Even, public speakers, they warm up before they go out to do their speeches, all kinds of warm-up exercises. In fact, there's little tools they use. There's this little thing they put between their teeth, and they practice saying sonnets and all kinds of stuff, to get themselves ready. But our main thing is enunciating our japa very carefully. It prepares you for these austerities of speech. Krishna empowers. Yeah, 1, 2.
I really like the point that you made, that when we're speaking to people at the table, or just we have books in our hands trying to get them to take whatever, that they're also a servant of Krishna. It's not like we're just talking to matter, but also remembering that we're both, servants of Krishna. It's really profound and amazing.
And it is profound. It's the most profound thing that's going on in the universe, to remember what's animating the body. And Krishna says it, Sharanagata's over there, is the most amazing thing in this universe is actually the soul. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Charyavat pashyati kashchirenam ascharyavat vadati tatai vachanya. Some hear of the soul is amazing, some speak of the soul is amazing, others even after hearing about him can't understand him at all. And the Upanishads are pointing to this. They're saying if you want to see the most amazing thing, look at yourself, because you're part of God, and you can get an idea what God's like by looking at yourself. And I remember several years ago leaving from this temple to go out and do Harinam book distribution, and we were going by one of the kind of congested sections just a few blocks away. This whole neighborhood's changed so much, but I just remember this profound experience I had going by a group of people. Some of them owned shops there and others, and the kirtan was palpably ecstatic. and several people had acknowledged us as we went by because they were caught by the sound. And then we went by another group of people, and I saw several of them didn't make any gesture at all. Not even that they looked at us and then waved us off or anything. It was absolute total ignorance of the fact that we were there. And it was nothing that could be ignored, I guarantee you. And then I had this profound experience of seeing that, oh, there's a soul in there. The soul knows what's happening here. That there's names of God going by, there's people chanting, and has chosen specifically to shut off and not acknowledge it. And that interaction with other souls and realizing that there are different levels of ignorance, like the word ignorance can be pronounced ignorance. Ignorance is ignorance, or ignorance is ignorance. It's just, it's not there. Krishna's there everywhere, but I'm going to pretend like he's not. And when he specifically comes to me in the form of a book or the Harinam, then I'm going to really dig down deep and make sure that I don't acknowledge it at all. Yes.
Haribol Guru Maharaj, I really like, all these points, like speak to the soul, speak from the soul, and what you're saying about the chanting and doing japa and tuning your tongue. So I experienced that like in Toastmaster, like many times I gave Bhagavad Gita shloka in Toastmaster, and people there, this particular about the speech, I once took this one, that truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and they said that it's impossible. That truth and it is beneficial and it is pleasing and it's not possible. But then I noticed that if I chant my japa properly, then that day in my Toastmaster also I'm able to speak very well on this one of the Bhagavad Gita shloka and able to convince it. So I just liked it, so wanted to share it with you.
Well, there it is, like a double-blind study. Because Toastmaster's like a laboratory for this, right? You can take it in and see. And when we were saying that, well, how could you do all these things at once? I was thinking of Prabhupada. Because he had this uncanny way of, telling the truth. And even though the truth may have been a little sharp sometimes, it was still, you'll see people smiling and going like, okay, thanks for chastising me and stuff like that. A pure devotee can do that. Please.
Yeah, it's the same like when a pure devotee,
when the pure devotee speaks, it touches the saffron particles of the lotus feet of Krishna.
Yes.
And
Yeah, and we should endeavor for that. That's one of the ways that we stay aligned through book distribution, is because there's this juxtaposition. On one side, we don't want to go out and be unsuccessful. And so, we increase our attention to our japa, as an example, and to our hearing, just with the hopes that we'll be a better tuned instrument when we go out. And when we go out and we feel whatever lacking is there, then we come back, and that's why hearing and chanting and going out to do book distribution complement one another. It keeps you on this dynamic balancing program where you're keeping yourself spiritually fit all the time just so you can do the service. And if you can develop that, it's like an athlete. I see, these athletes, they always, even they go on vacation, they have to still go out and do their run and, do whatever they're doing to stay fit, because they know they take a few days off and next thing, they're a hundredth of a second behind somebody else. So having that kind of push is very important. Divyangi.
Hare Krishna. I really like this point, speak from the soul.
Yes.
Because sometimes I feel like when you become a little bit better in something, and when you still approach people, there is a kind of tendency, at least to me, think that, I'm a devotee, or I can cannot do these things. But actually, if we speak from the soul to soul, it seems like we're not different. Maybe we just know a little bit more than these people, but we're there just to share with them and give this knowledge to them.
Very important, and it's a point in one of the other seminars about don't condescend. When we go out, remember Trinata Pisuni Chena, and don't think, there is a way in which you can develop to the point where you feel like, oh yeah, I can manipulate anybody. Because I know psychology now, and Krishna's empowered me. But don't take that. It's like same admonition given in the in the Shastras, these mystic powers, you develop them and you start thinking like, wow, look what I can do. So you can also develop that sense on book distribution that you're like, I know how to manipulate people, but resist that and speak from the soul and to the soul, and so that you don't, start thinking like, this is my power. It's Krishna's power coming through you, and it's meant specifically to benefit the soul. Who was, yes, Dr. Jose.
So,
Hare Krishna.
thank you for having me here. So, about the Sankirtan, what I experienced, what I have in a couple of months now, is I do it by myself. I put a table in a corner of my house. So to try to do at least a couple of hours the distribution of the Bhagavad Gita. So I started and I experienced compare before when I lived in the temple back in the day in the 80s. So to now, going here, the first day when I go out, it was like I feel afraid to talk to the people. And then, and think of myself, what I do it before was door by door, what I do it before. When I got it with incense and pause and the book. That was, I opened the incense first, and then they opened the book later. So in here, try to talk in the Hispanic community, where it is on Washington High. I thought it was very difficult when I tried to start to open the table. But on my mind say, well, so what would I go afraid here for? So that's what Prabhupada said. What we're supposed to do, give the message in the street to the people, spread the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then, and that day, when I'm thinking like that, so the first person that passed by me was a drunk guy. And I looked at him, and I asked him if we want to take little candy. And he looked at me, and he looked at the book. I got all the book at hand, like this. And he looked at the Bhagavad Gita, and he said, how much is that book? I said, I don't sell the book. I gotta give you the book, but you take the candy. So my first experience is he was drunk. And they sort of pushed me to go out every day with the table and there, because you cannot look at the person because of this or that or the clothes or whatever. You gotta speak with the soul. That's what I want for you, or that's what I have for you, whatever.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, someone sent an image to me of this adolescent advocate. She's from where? Sweden or something? What is her name? Greta
Oh, for the climate?
Thunberg.
Nuremberg.
Greta Thunberg. So somebody sent me a picture of when she first started her protest. She was boycotting school, and she's all by herself sitting outside whatever the government building was with a sign. And there's this iconic image of her by herself, sitting there with her sign, and you're just like one little girl against the government, against the world kind of thing. And it reminded me of the power of one. That what power does one person have? That you have this determination in your heart. Well, Prabhupada, took the trouble to come on the Jaladuta. He was one person. What happened? And here I am, I can't do anything, but I'm all alone. But I'll put up a table, and, I'll just try. And it has that really inspiring effect when people see that there's somebody out there that doing what they're supposed to do what they believe in. And it has an inordinate effect, one that we cannot imagine. So everybody can feel free to cultivate whatever that urge is within them, that I should do the right thing, and I go out, and even though I'm scared to do it, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do it anyway. You'll see that that's where magic happens, and that's where spiritual awakening happens also, not just for the people you meet, but for ourselves, to see that Krishna is using me. And these kinds of stories, like you brought out, are very inspirational. Okay, last one from Govinda, and I'm going to go to the next part of the presentation.
Marge, I like when you said, when you're talking about austerities of speech,
Yes?
that's regularly reciting the Vedic scriptures.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of Chad.
Yes?
That how important it is for book distributors to do Chad, because to have our speech austere.
Yes. Chad means chapter a day, means reciting at least one chapter of Bhagavad Gita every day. Or I've noticed that the Chad group will now prescribe even half a chapter, because some of the chapters are very long. And I've taken to just following whatever they recommend, because it's much easier for me to just follow the authority. So I go to the website and I see what chapter everybody else is on, and then I just do it. Just like if your doctor tells you to take a kind of supplement every day, and then you just have to be vigilant to do it. Put the bottle where you can see it, and then every day, get it into a routine that you take it before you drink your orange juice. And in the same way, it's important to recite the Bhagavad Gita every day. Did you know that in our Archana Paddhati, it says that one of the ways to overcome aparadhas, seva aparadhas, that is aparadhas committed while worshipping the deity, is to recite one chapter of Bhagavad Gita a day? Did you know that throughout the Gita Mahatmya, there are stories about the miraculous effects of people who have chanted one chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and people, entities who have come alive, who were dead just by hearing it and so forth? It gives these amazing stories to encourage us of and remind us of the transcendental power of reciting one chapter of Bhagavad Gita. But it is something that Prabhupada personally advocated. He said, see to it that all my students every day read at least one chapter of Bhagavad Gita a day. And Prabhupada used to recite chapters himself. So it's a highly authorized program. And you'll notice sadhus doing it all the time. One Kartik, when I was going to Radha Damodar every day in Vrindavan, doing my rounds around Vrindavan, and I saw this little sadhu. He was sitting over by the samadhis, that area in the back. He had his little niche back there. And every day he recited the whole Bhagavad Gita. And I'd walk by him, and at a certain time of the day, he'd be partway through. And every time I'd come around, he was a little further along. I kind of poked my head in to see whether he looked up like, leave me alone. But I was feeling the transcendental potency coming from that little corner. And whatever little corner of the world we live in, you can create that same power by reciting the Bhagavad Gita every day. The next part of this presentation is what is the most interesting topic to every living being? Yes, Mataji?
Sorry.
Not at all.
We meeting devotees. We're going on Brighton Beach today.
Oh.
We have to leave. Please give us your blessings.
Well, I want to go to Brighton Beach.
This time we're trying today having a book table on Brighton Beach on boardwalk. So a little bit scary and excited at the same time. And we're leaving the rest of the devotees at 1 p.m. there, so we have to leave.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Really
Is everybody going?
No, just 2 of us.
Oh, well, that's a lot.
No. Yeah, we're a small team.
Well, thank you very much for being here for this part. And we'll be thinking of you down at Brighton Beach. All the different teams should be thinking of and praying for the other teams, wherever they may be. But we'll make a prayer. Please, Prabhu, say.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Actually, we are. This is first time when we are trying to come over there with the Russian books on the Russian books. So this is our first attempt, and we ordered some partial books from LA. Let's see what's going to happen there.
Do you have a Russian sign?
Yes, we prepare.
It's like a magnet. We saw that in California. Wherever we put up a Russian sign, from anywhere, Russians come over. And if there's other Russians there, they're like, what are you doing? It's like, we're Krishna conscious, and you want to join? And go, yeah, I love Russians. So it's going to be wonderful. And it's opening up new areas that are closed in tight with the material energy. You're going there and opening up. The main duty today is just get in there. Don't worry about the result. Just know that you're being there, your very presence there is putting a little gap in that material energy, and it's opening it up, and let Krishna make all the arrangements. You just be like confident, relaxed, and know that the only duty you have to touch the pavement and set up your table and sign, and you're going to be good. Dear Srila Prabhupada, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, please empower the Brighton Beach party to have a huge day today. Thank you for considering our request. Hare Krishna. Gaur Premanande Haribol. Imagine how pleased Prabhupada is. Russian books, and now they're going out all over the world in various places. We want to see more and more pallets of those books coming in and going out to different parts of the world. Hare Krishna. Okay, now, yes?
One question on,
Yes.
One question on reciting Bhagavad Gita shlokas.
Yes.
So if you're doing every day, is it shloka for translation every day? Because,
The minimum is just the shlokas. So at least do just all the Sanskrit or all the English. Or you can divide the chapters in half if you need to, because they may be really long, like the 18th chapter or chapter 2. So just do the Sanskrit or just do the English as the minimum. And then you can also add in like a purport, or you can just spend time reading the whole thing if you want to, but at least do your chanting of the verses, because that keeps the vibration going in a really profound way. What is the most interesting topic to every living being? This is an important thing to know as we're interacting with people. And what is it?
Self.
His or her own self. Really is. And as mentioned by Dale Carnegie, he said, remember that a man's name is, to him, the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Dale, I'm talking to you, Dale. Shukadev Goswami said, it is his own self that is most dear to every embodied living being. This is in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, near the end of the chapter, when he's talking about how the soul is dear to everybody, and the super soul is even more dear. And he says, it is simply for the satisfaction of this self that the whole material creation of moving and non-moving entities exist. That's from 10:14:54, for those of you who are keeping score. And as many people teach when teaching communication, everybody's tuned into the same radio station, which is WII-FM, which stands for, let's see if I can do this properly. What? What's in it for me? Yeah. In advertising, in marketing, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they tell all about themselves. And, for instance, put out a brochure and say, here's a picture of our company building, here's how many employees we have. And experts will say, nobody cares. They want to see a picture of themselves. And they want to know, what am I going to get out of this? And so when you're presenting, it's a good idea to present first what's in it for them and to remember. Now, I'm going to save you a lot of time because I'm going to tell you the principle for dealing with fanatics. Have you ever met a fanatic? In or outside the temple? They come everywhere. It could be anywhere. So here's the rule, and I got this New York University professor who wrote a book called How to Win an Argument, and he talks about dealing with fanatics. And the principle, here's a fanatic, a person filled with excessive and single-minded zeal, especially for an extreme religious or political cause. And here's his first rule for dealing with a fanatic, and that is don't. Did I save you a lot of time? So this is also mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ishvare taradineshu balisheshu dusatsucha prema maitri kripopeksha yakaroti samadhyamaha. The Madhyamadikari is the preacher who goes out into the world to deliver Krishna consciousness, and he or she is asked to distinguish between the mentalities of different people. And those who are averse to Krishna consciousness and whatever you're offering, they're not interested, we are asked to be upeksha, or standoffish. We're not supposed to approach them or to push it. And therefore, as I've mentioned before in other seminars, when we go out to distribute Krishna consciousness, the way in which we should think about it, or can think about it, is as if we are picking fruits. And when you go to pick fruits from a tree, which ones do you pick first?
Right.
Correct. And when you find an unripe fruit, you grab onto it, and because it won't come off the branch, you break the branch, and you drag it down. This is A, still A. And you drag it down the street, the fruit still on the branch, and you drag it as far as you can. Or B, you leave it on the vine to ripen later. A or B?
B.
Similarly, when you find somebody who's determinedly against Krishna consciousness, not interested in what you're offering, A, you should follow them down the street to their apartment and insist that they take Krishna consciousness. Or B, you should say, have a nice day, and smile and let them go. B, correct. B is correct. So oftentimes I find that there's a tendency in me and others that I want to convert everybody. I want every transaction to be successful. And it can be every transaction successful, because once you know what a successful transaction looks like, then you can make it successful. So if somebody's averse, it's a successful transaction to let them go. And if somebody's completely open and they want to know more, a successful transaction is that you pour in as much mercy as possible. And therefore, every transaction will be successful if you know what the definition is. And that helps a lot, knowing what our goal is when we go out. What do you think of that? Does that save you a lot of time and anxiety? Because if you just go and you wait for good people to come, and don't worry what other people think of you, like how come they can't stop everybody and so forth. Oftentimes I take devotees out on book distribution and they see my technique, which I stay back a little bit and I wait for good people to come to me. They're thinking like, why isn't he charging after every person? I thought he knew how to distribute books. Why isn't he insisting that everybody take? But that's not what I do. I wait until I see a sign from people that I'm open. I'd like to engage with you. There's a conscious connection. And when I do that, it saves me a lot of trouble, because I've been through a lot in my life and I don't need any more grief. Okay, so the next principle is to become a master asker. To become what?
Master asker.
Yeah, this is one of the greatest secrets of communication. The greatest communicators are not tellers, they're askers. And one of the reasons is you have to know that the most powerful punctuation mark in any language is the question mark. The question mark acts like a hook. And when you ask people a question, then there's a sense that they should answer it. They don't always answer it. And they know that. Sometimes they deliberately won't answer it because they know they'll be caught on your little hook. But it holds, it catches, it brings people back when you ask questions. And it's also like a tennis racket. Like if you make a nice little hook, and if you put strings across it, then you got a little tennis racket. So it reframes. So when somebody asks you a question that you can't answer, don't answer it. Ask them a question back. And one of the things that you can ask back to get an idea about what they're talking about, what they're actually asking, is to ask people, how do you mean that? Everyone say.
How do you mean that?
So oftentimes when we find people, when we're out teaching Krishna consciousness, who ask us questions where we seem, even if you seem momentarily unable to answer the question, don't answer it. because it means that if you don't have a ready answer that you're used to saying to people that you know perfectly fits, or that suddenly comes into your mental system because Super Soul just handed it to you on a little jit and said, here, say this, then ask them instead, ask them back a question, say, how do you mean that? What do you mean by that? Because that makes them refine the question and put it back to you in such a way that you can answer it, and that saves a lot of time and energy. Another question that you can ask people sometimes, and these aren't meant to be annoying, that every time somebody asks you a question, you just ask a question back. But it's meant to be utilitarian, because if you're thinking in terms of service, how can I best serve this person by giving them an answer that will help them, and you ask judiciously when you don't understand what they're trying to get at, then it's more effective, rather than just mechanically always answering a question with a question. But another question you can ask sometimes that's very helpful is, why do you ask? Actually, I got it from a joke, because there were two guys walking in New York, and one of them was from out of town. And the friend from out of town kept asking questions about the city, and the New Yorker was then answering whatever questions he asked with a question. And after about 3 blocks, the out-of-towner said, every time I ask you a question, you answer with a question. I said, why do you do that? And the New Yorker answered back, why do you ask? Another principle that Prabhupada taught about communication was, assail the philosophy, not the person. Assail the philosophy and not the philosopher. As oftentimes people will say, this happened when devotees first went to India with Prabhupada, and there they were, a little bit educated about the philosophy, and then they met a myriad people who had varying degrees of philosophy from their own culture, and they would say, what do you think about such and such, Swami? And so when they came back to Prabhupada and said, what do we say when they ask about such and such, Swami? And Prabhupada said, then ask, what is his philosophy? Don't ask him, don't say anything about the person, but just like, oh, that person's bogus, wholesale bogus. Just say, look, what is the person's philosophy? Even if you know generally what the philosophy is, don't speculate and say, oh, that person is this category. Just ask, what is his philosophy? Because they might have some other idea of what the person's philosophy is. And then you can compare it to what it says in the Bhagavad Gita and leave it at that level. Don't give ad hominem kind of responses to people and their whatever philosophy they're following. But be very specific about points in the philosophy. Does that make sense? It's very helpful in dealing with people in a way that becomes non-abrasive and helps us to get the message across to people. Okay, a conversation with Prabhupada. Woman reporter, why do you people shave your heads? Prabhupada answers the question with a question. Why do you shave your legs? Srila Prabhupada, student guest, why are most of your followers young people? Srila Prabhupada, why are most university students young people? Student guest, because that is the age of education. Prabhupada, that is also the age of Krishna consciousness. See, he waited for the pitch. He kept asking a question, so give me a pitch I can hit. And then it's boom. So if you keep asking questions back until it's right down the middle, then bang. Yes.
I think also lack of intellectual and lack of...
Here, use the mic, start from the beginning.
I think lack of intellectual we have, lack of also Vedic literature knowledge we have, so that we cannot hit like Prabhupada. So we will be easily aggravated or angry. That is the reason we lost the point. But Prabhupada win the point.
Yeah. So we also shouldn't become agitated or angry. And actually, with just the Sri Upanishad, if you study the Sri Upanishad, you learn all the verses, you know you feel what they mean, you know what they mean, you have enough to go out and present Krishna consciousness at a university successfully with an authorized Shruti. And you can go there and you'll know everything about Krishna consciousness. From that one book, you'll be able to prove that God is a person. You'll be able to distinguish that there are higher and lower energies that come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You'll be able to talk about the process of devotional service from these verses. There's only 18 verses, 19 with the invocation. And if you just learn that one book, you'll be a perfect presenter of Krishna consciousness. Everything complete. In fact, in the early days when there were very few books, and one of the early sannyasis who had gone to South India had memorized the Sri Upanishad and got into a public debate with so-called Big Pundit down in South India. And he was a brand new American sannyasi, bright, fresh-faced, right off the boat. And there they were in a public debate. And this man was a Mayavadi, and he was trying to say that God was impersonal. And this new sannyasi quoted, Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam bukam tatvam pushana pavrenu satyadharmaya drishteye. And there it is from Shruti, saying that the devotee's making a prayer in this Ishapanic verse that please remove the effulgence of your transcendental rays so I can see your face. And so the devotee brought up, say, how you could say he's impersonal? It says right here in the Upanishads that he has a face. And all the crowd got behind our sannyasi. And they were like, he wins, And so, Prabhupada equipped us. It's not that just Prabhupada can preach. Any of us can preach because he empowered us to do it through his books. So we should do that. Okay, so next one. Professor, why do you give sannyas to young people? Prabhupada, what do you mean by young? See? Answering a question with a question. Professor, silence. Prabhupada answers his own question. Young means about to die. Can you say you are any older or younger than they are? Boom. So we can also be ready with various questions to ask people, because when you're asking questions, you're leading the conversation. And the next part is that people respond to sincere compliments. Almost infallible principle. Because people really don't get many compliments. They're starved for compliments, and if you're a sincere well-wisher and you find something that's meritorious about them and you point it out, then it's amazing how quickly you'll find a way to their heart. And so sincere compliments are extremely powerful, and if you make that one of the elements of your presentation is finding a way to give a sincere compliment to people, you'll find very quickly that they open their heart to you. Now, I don't know how sincere this next compliment is, but when Sanatana Goswami was put in jail by his employer, he told the jailkeeper, "My dear sir, you are a saintly person and are very fortunate. You have full knowledge of the revealed scriptures such as the Quran and similar books." And just after telling him that, he let him out of jail. One of the compliments that I give people that is universal, and which I find keeps me in the realm of speaking to the soul and from the soul, is I tell people, you look spiritual, and I ask them the question, what's your secret? It's an amazing principle to me. It's like, if anybody has had this experience that, let's say you walk out of your house, your apartment, your ashram, and someone comes up to you and goes, "Boy, you look tired. How do you feel?" Yeah, you might then look in the mirror and like, "God, I do look tired." Or if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, you really look terrible today." I mean, it doesn't happen very much probably, but has anybody had somebody say, "You look such and such"? And then you'll get mental about it, perhaps. I know I do. So then, what if somebody says to you, "You look spiritual"? Turn to the person next to you and say, "You look spiritual." How do you feel? You're cool, you look spiritual. This is something I discovered just by, messing around out there. But you know what? It's like instant self-realization. Because the soul is spiritual, and they've just forgotten. And if you come up to somebody and say, "You look spiritual," it short circuits the whole false ego. And all of a sudden they realize themselves and they go, you're right, I am, I'm a soul, I forgot, I'm from the spiritual world. It's like instantaneous self-realization. When you look spiritual, yeah, it's very powerful. Very powerful. And then if you add the question of what's your secret? Everyone say, what's your secret? Now turn to this person next to you and ask them, what's your secret? What this question does, it's actually psychological. We're asking it sincerely, but this is such a powerful part of the presentation because when you ask somebody what their secret is, it eliminates the principle of condescension because, and I'll tell you how. One of the reasons that people don't like to talk to us when we're on the street is they're walking along minding their own business. We're out there basically, if you want to look at from a higher up position, saying, look you're really messed up and you got to take this, otherwise you're going to stay messed up. I mean, really, that's what we're saying. Otherwise we wouldn't be out there. So, to eliminate that, basically we even the playing field by telling them that they look spiritual and then they realize themselves and then asking them, what's your secret? This then puts them in on the Vyasasana. In other words, you're placing them on the Vyasasana and you're saying, you're spiritual. Now you're my teacher. I'm not teaching you, you're teaching me. You please tell me, how did you get spiritual like this? And you'll notice a shift suddenly in the psychology between you and your interlocutor. That person then becomes comfortable with you because he or she understands you're not there to condescend, to take away their freedom, to change them or any way. You're a well-wisher. You've understood them, and you really have. So these two things put together, you look spiritual, and what's your secret? If you don't say anything else when you go out, and you only use these two lines exclusively, I guarantee you, or I'll pay for every book you don't sell, that this will work. If you just walk up to people and say, excuse me, you look spiritual. What's your secret?
Do you think we need to also observe the person?
To do what?
To say it? Like, do you think we should observe the person? Sometimes if you say something, if it is not meant to them, they may be, very offense. So do you think it's better to observe the person or then say it?
Yes.
Some people not spiritual, using a lot of things, a lot of...
Yes, it is. I'm generalizing here, but it is very important to observe people. And as most of you know, in my presentation, this is an excerpt from there, but I advocate that it's important to make a conscious connection with people before presenting. And this goes along with the principle of looking for the right fruits. So what I'm looking for is a conscious connection with people because living entities are smart. They know you're there. They know why you're there also. And if you, for instance, make a connection with them by saying hi, waving your hand, or whatever way you want to make a connection with them eye to eye, they will broadcast to you through their countenance to what degree they're interested in having an interaction with you. And those who smile or they wave back are tacitly saying, yes, I would like to enter into a long-term relationship. I would like to become Krishna conscious. I will become a student of the Krishna consciousness movement. I will surrender, and I will agree to do whatever it takes to go back to Godhead. Not actually, but there's a degree to which they're opening themselves just by smiling in their countenance. And then we can enter into the conversation and start exchanging gifts, which is what we're really doing out there. And another phrase that I find extremely helpful is I say, I could tell by looking at you that, ... There's a lot of things you can add on to that. For instance, when some people say, I already know about this, the counteracting phrase is, I know, I could tell by looking at you. Because what you're doing is, instead of resisting or ignoring what they're saying, you're honoring what they're saying. It's like, I already know this, and I already know everything. So, I know. I could tell by looking at you. Yeah, and it's a compliment, but it's also the principle of honoring objections. because whatever you resist will persist. And when people offer an objection, if you reject it out of hand, then you don't have a chance with them. They have to be open to take it. And as soon as you honor their objection and say, yeah, I agree with you, and then you go on presenting, then you have an option to present. Any questions? Yes. Is everyone okay still?
Yes.
Am I over time?
You can take some time over. It's okay, fine.
It's 10 to 1.
What time are we supposed to leave?
Supposed to finish at 1?
1:30 is Prashad.
1:30, okay.
Okay. Please go ahead.
How important is it to stop at the right point? Because you said how we should give as much mercy as they can take. So sometimes I find that speaking to the person, he's interested and just telling, then listening, and then all of a sudden they lose.
Then their cell phone rings, or their friend comes out of the store and goes, Larry, let's go. Come
Not
on.
even that, all of a sudden they just switch, and you feel all of a sudden change. They were interested, they were hearing, and then they want
And that's how Krishna feels when we're chanting japa. And all of a sudden our mind switches to something else. You go, hey, what are you looking at? Where'd you go? You know, you were right here with me a second ago, so now you know how it feels.
Is it our mistake that we should predict this, or is it's fine?
No, you have to fine tune, you have to predict it. So the fact is, if somebody, for instance, if somebody's ready to go, where you show the Bhagavad Gita, I've been looking for the Bhagavad Gita. No, listen to my whole presentation. It'll just take half an hour. No, as soon as they agree to something, then you can consummate the interaction right there and then. So oftentimes people say, I love the Bhagavad Gita, I've been looking for this, and they say, yeah, it's not for sale, it's just for donation. And boom, they just give. They're already to that point. You don't have to bring them to the point. So be aware of when to finish. And when I say finish, oftentimes this is really where the rubber meets the road, this thing about asking for a donation. So why do we do that in the first place? Well, first let me say, there is a real pinch when we deprive somebody of the opportunity of reciprocating in a meaningful way. It's not absolutely necessary that we get a donation from everybody. In fact, we have to be able to consider for ourselves what the mood of the person was and how much they'll be able to appreciate the book even if they don't give a donation, if they're not able to, or for any other reason. But the fact is that offering them an opportunity to give something in return gives them the chance to become more deeply connected with the literature. And therefore, telling people at the end that there's an ancient tradition, giving something, or whatever other way you ask for donations, but the way I tell them is that we don't sell it like in a bookstore, but we ask for a donation. We don't need the money, but it's an ancient tradition. When you give something in return for spiritual knowledge, it connects you to the teachers who have passed it on over many generations. And that is something when people give under those circumstances voluntarily for the book, they have a deeper relationship with it. And that's what Prabhupada told us, that somebody gives their $10, they'll walk away and they say, let me see what I've given this rascal my $10 for. Other points? Yes. 1, 2. Points or questions?
I have a little bit of difficulties with that. I feel I used to distribute books, and in my head, how it works, I like to be honest. So because we are selling the books, even to cover the cost, we are selling the books. And I don't like that people, everybody goes and asking for donation instead of saying minimum donation of that, but if you want to give more, that would be wonderful, we will be using for this or that. Because in people's mind, when I put myself on the side of, person. I feel like I don't want them to feel they are trying to be cunning or cheat them. And instead of selling sale, we're saying donation, and then people in their mind, they get confused how much I can give. Can I give little and get more? And we still need to profit to, to buy the books and to cover the cost. I feel like it's important to be honest from very beginning by saying correct words, how we ask. Yes, we're there to give you benefit. We wanna, for minimum donation, this book of $5, for example, or $1. But if you're willing to give more, we will use this for this and this purpose. And I feel it's very clear from beginning, and person know where he stands and what minimum donation he can give. And also, he can be generous to give even more. We inspire him to give more. That's my view on that. How you feel about that?
This is an excellent point. Thank you for making this point for clarity's sake. And if you are actually selling the book and you need to get a certain amount, it's actually tension reducing to be very clear from the beginning that I require at least $5. I mean, I wouldn't say it exactly like this, for the book. And then if you want to give more, it's a donation. Oftentimes it relieves the anxiety of the donor, because one of the reasons that people say I don't have any money, which isn't true, is because they're not sure of how much to give. And the conundrum they get into is that obviously this is a valuable book. I don't want to, I'm not willing to give what it's worth. That's what they're thinking in their mind, that, I can't really part with $20 right now. And they're thinking this book is at least $20. And also, if I give less, then I look like a real cheap person. So they get into this thing, and then they sort of shut down and they say, I don't have any money. So one of the ways to overcome that is to be very clear, as you've just been, and say that, the printing of these costs us such and such amount, and so they're $5 or $10 or $20 or $50 or whatever you're going to say, whatever it actually is for you. And then you could also add that, and anything you give over that is a donation. So that helps clear things for people. On the other hand, if you're not actually selling them, you are free to ask for donations and take whatever they like. But I don't think it's a good idea to mix the two. In other words, if you have to get in your mind $5 for each book, and then somebody gives you, $2, and you say, oh, by the way, that's not enough, that causes a lot of problems. So the two things should be distinguished. The way I distribute is a little different, because I honestly don't care how much they give as long as they give. Because in my methodology, it all comes out in the wash. Because some people give $20, $50, $100, $500, I don't know what they're going to give. And other people will give, I'll say, just sometimes people say I don't have any money, and I say just give a penny. And they'll suddenly find, remember, they have a whole bag of change, and they'll give me $1.27. But I don't then say, oh, by the way, that's not enough. I do let them have the book, because that's my method from the beginning. Because that's just how I present. Sometimes I do go back to the other method, but when I'm in that mode of letting them have the book and leaving it to them, how much they want to give, then it's a distinct presentation, and it doesn't mix the two. But I think what you said is extremely important, because one of the rubbing points in the minds of devotees and also in the public walking by is, are they actually being straightforward? So if you're willing to let the book go, then you can say you give whatever you want. But then don't say afterwards that wasn't enough, and can I give you a smaller copy or something like that.
The front saying donation, and there is the gap when they think how much to give. And you clearly, if you come with that attitude, then you basically don't clarify how much book costs. But if you're
You'll have to use the mic, because the people online are freaking out because they can't hear you.
Not that was loud enough. Yeah, if you have a purity of the heart and that's your attitude from up front, then I think so. That's the honesty. It will be translated.
I don't know if it's purity. It's more just timidity or something like that.
But you have to have some attitude of purity to come.
No, you can experiment with different ways and see what works for you. And I do recommend that with book distribution because we have a whole field out there. Find out a legitimate way to present that doesn't agitate people's minds, that's very straightforward and honest, and then you can try it. For instance, sometimes people say, they'll ask for a donation. They'll say, we just ask for a small donation. Well, why not change your language and say, we just ask for a big donation? Instead of saying, $5, why not say $50? Why not say 100? We try to get 100 from everybody. And see what happens. At least 20% of the time, try something that's a little bit pushing the envelope the other way. And again, it should be straightforward and honest and in a way that doesn't agitate people, and don't give people whiplash, because they remember that. And if you're very kind and detached, what I've found is that I've had even people come back and chase after me to give more, because I leave it up to them. And then and because there's no resistance at all, there's no passive aggression, like, boy, that's a really big donation, or something like nothing, no residual effect. They feel, actually, I'm ready to give it to them. Then it's an interesting energy to deal with. You'll see that oftentimes it compels them to want to do more because it's voluntary. But both sides are good.
Yeah, and one more thing, I also from experience, I noticed everybody have a different personality, and when we speak about certain things oh, you can use this approach or this approach, as listeners, a devotee who wants to go outside and use those techniques, sometimes those techniques clashes with our personality. And when we are going there and there is a mixture of a little bit of fear, maybe, that overcome this barrier with the people, approach them. And if it's not aligned with our personality, if we are not very humorous or have a sense of humor, if we are trying to say hey, I like your cap, it might be insincere. I think so it's important to just reflect who we are and understand what works for me and what will be more sincere, or develop those techniques, and also maybe have a consultation with advanced devotee, make sure they're correct and everything appropriate. But sometimes devotees just take this out of the lecture and they all go and they're trying to say, oh, I like your cap, or you're very spiritual, just a technique without actually observing the person because some of them can be offended because inside they know they're really doing a lot of, and that is just looking at that comment as an insincere, just they know they're trying to you're just trying to stop them. And some of them actually you might have a situation when person start actually, instead of you trying to sell something, he will try to tell you the tricks of the trade, how he becomes spiritual and what make him spiritual, and he will be more rooted in what he is doing and walking away like this and wasting your time. I think so we have to, after listening all of this, we have to still know what it works for me, what approach can work. It's not become, just
Yes, these are excellent points and very important, because first of all, one of the benefits of going out into public and actually trying this, and by this I mean to transfer a gift of knowledge into the home of somebody, into the life of somebody else, or at least have a very, an interaction that makes people feel like, oh, I met a spiritual person who's representing out here, even if they don't take. And the stated goal, the prime directive that we talk about in our seminars, which probably most of you remember, is that to leave everyone with a good impression. So we go out with that as our prime objective. Now, when we're out in the atmosphere of the public, which means the great unknown, you don't know what's going to happen or how people are going to react, there is a learning curve, always, because there's no training program that you can take out there and then that'll anticipate everything that's going to happen. And one of the purifying effects of going out and doing this is making mistakes and getting feedback from your environment. I've found that it's a path to self-realization, sincerely trying to interact with people and transmit goodwill to them, and then being rebuffed or rejected or challenged, or somebody then becomes dug in more deeply. And that informs me. I'm always still learning and seeing how to be more sensitive and refining myself more. As I said in the beginning, one has to be really refined to go out with the right intention, to be sincere, as you're saying, and not insincere. I do always hesitate to present a template, because then, as you say, it could be misused and someone might say, oh, this is the thing, it's just a trick. You just say, hey, I like your hat. However, the other side, I find that when I go to various communities and I teach a simple template with the disclaimer that this is just a starter idea. There are many, many ideas, and that each person has his or her own genius that will emerge. But I do find that when somebody has at least one template, for instance, for presenting Bhagavad Gita, and here is a systematic way to present it, they generally don't freeze up when they go out there. They can go through and say, you know, here are the pictures, here's this guy, it's changing bodies. And then they get on the OJT, on the job training, when they're out there and learn their own way. There's no shortcut. You actually have to try this and see, some of the best things that can happen to you are that people will object or reject you out of hand and so forth. And then you see for yourself, oh, I have to tone it this way or that way. And so I always try to give as much disclaimer as possible with these things. And with the presentation of You Look Spiritual, leading up to that, my intention is to really say, Yastu sarvari bhutani atmani vanupashyati. Anupashyati, as I presented the verse, means to really remember, according to Shastra, that people are souls. And when you do say that, it's not just a technique. You should actually feel it. Speak from the soul to the soul. And if you're doing it sincerely, not just work, there's a kind of combustion that you'll know, it's palpable that, wow, there was something there. And of course, there's always going to be ways in which we miss. And those are definite learning experiences. Your points are extremely well taken, that, it's not just that we learn a few lines and we go out there, and we definitely should try to be as sincere as possible in presenting with people and sensitive to the fact that they're not stupid and they don't like being just manipulated or something like that. It should be very straightforward. So it's a fine balance, because on one side, if you just tell devotees go out and be sincere and present any way you want, they'll be ill-equipped. And I see it all the time. New devotees go out and they'll be like chasing somebody down the street with a book. It's like, no, take it, or they don't know what to say exactly. But if you give them a template, there it is. But that balance point is very important that you're bringing out, that it has to be present, to the students who are going out to present it, it has to be kind of clear. And you really don't know what's going to happen till you walk out the door. And then wow, there's actually live bullets out here that have to be aware. Prabhu, I didn't call on you for a long time.
First of all, it's great to see you.
Kochira koso.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Radhika and I are very inspired by what you do and what you present around the world. You're talking about mistakes being a good learning tool is very powerful. So I'm trying to challenge myself to do book distribution more after listening to you more and more. But I still feel more comfortable at a book table. So for example, Alex goes out every day, I think, and whenever I get a chance to go out on like the weekly Harinams for the Bhakti Center, I try to be at his table, so I'm more comfortable at the table rather than being out there and speaking to people. But I remember a mistake I made a few weeks ago. There was this Muslim girl from the Middle East who came up to the table, and she was excitedly rifling through the books, and she wanted to take one, and I asked for a donation, which I'd asked other people that day and it worked. But somehow the moment she heard about the donation, she put the book back, and then I said, nobody can take it, or we asked for this to even a penny, right? And I gave her the different lines that I had, And she put it down and went away. Even to this day, I think of her every day because I feel like, dang, she's probably gone back to the Middle East, and where is she going to run into a book?
Yeah.
And so your point is very powerful that you let them have it if they don't feel like giving a donation.
Yeah, it's you live and learn out there, and I contend that it's really. Some of the times they're still seared into my brain, the times when I became angry at somebody, and then there was an inordinate reaction. And it just, things went haywire. And I was like, wow, anger is a really dangerous energy. Or any kind of low energy that I come out ill-prepared because I have some motive, and therefore I'm presenting not out of sincerity to try to actually fulfill the order of the spiritual master and to do good for the person, but I'm thinking like they have to take because I present, you take. That's our relationship. and when they don't, then there's this sense of like, what's wrong with you? But that kind of energy is very destructive actually on a personal level, and it also spills out into them. And so it's like a biofeedback machine. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they were popular in the 70s and 80s. They hook up all these little devices to your body, and then you can measure how much you can actually manipulate your biorhythms with your brain. And you get instant feedback from the machine. It's going, wow, it's going way up now. Calm down, bring it down. And similarly, like going out on Sankirtan is like being hooked up to one of those machines. You get that kind of feedback instantaneously from your environment. And so in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the ways in which he's pleased with devotees who don't cause anxiety to others, who aren't disturbed when they're insulted or when there's a good result, bad result. They're just, presenting. And so these incidents are very valuable. You remember that forever, that thing that happened, right? And then it becomes something that informs you. And there's no shortcut to maturity. You have to go through some of these things in order to become mature. But as a group, I really like your points. We have to, kind of inculcate these principles that the ultimate goals leave people with good impression. And in the past, we've geared up, like in the way past, we've geared up just for efficiency, which doesn't work on a public level because, people are more sensitive than just reacting to efficiency. They need actual love, care, and understanding, and at the very least, well-informed customer service. The customer's always right, and leave people with a good impression. And when we go out in that mood, first of all, it's good for the Hare Krishna movement because, people want to see spiritual people. They don't want to see somebody who's actually, self-interested or got a profit motive. But at the same time, we want to be effective in making sure that people, we transfer the information to them. And actually, so many of the anomalies occur in our minds more than in reality. Because oftentimes people are, or most times, people are a lot more open and friendly than one would imagine, especially those who don't go out in Sankirtan. I mean, you've been out for years, so you know what's going on. But I know lots of people, they have all kinds of fears and speculations about what book distribution means because they've never been out on Sankirtan. And they just hear things and then they imagine what it's probably like everybody hates us or whatever, but it's not true. And about tables, I think it's really important. And the more that we can get spots that plant us in a place where we have legitimacy, an air of legitimacy, like I heard that you got a spot out at Times Square for a couple $100 a permit. Is that true? And then you just park there, right? And you can have Harinam and book distribution at the same time. I personally feel like that's ideal because then more devotees want to come out and they feel safer that they're part of this thing. When you just wander off by yourself, that's for Navy SEALs. who have been trained like 50 times, like, I could jump out of the airplane, like, after the 49 times, like, oh, I can jump out of an airplane. But if you send new people out and like, go, jump out of an airplane, they'll be like, what? This is crazy. I can't walk down a New York City street by myself and just stop people here, there, and everywhere. That's really dangerous. It traumatizes new people. They should have an environment that's really protected. That's why the MSF is really meant to do that. And the more ways that we can develop our infrastructure, our branding, the way we look out there, the places that we claim by permit, legitimate, so even the police can't move us on. And that builds a psychological confidence in the devotees who are going out. More will come out also. So I agree, tables are the answer, especially in New York, where tables are king here in this city. We should have more tables than anybody. And if they can make millions of dollars selling Sheetal Pain Balm around Govardhan Hill, there's this company, Sheetal Pain Balm, and during Kartik and Purushottam Mas, they have hundreds of tables all around Govardhan Hill. And the little speakers going all day long, Sheetal Pain Balm, Sheetal Pain Balm, Sheetal Pain Balm. And it's like the power of presence, having your tables everywhere. And I looked into it, they made millions. Actually, one of the things I wrote about in my book, I think I was in South India in the 80s, and this phenomena emerged where these people had those little carts and they were selling cold water. And it was only 5 paisa a glass or something, but it was guaranteed a clean, cold water. And it was, it's hot down there. And they had them everywhere. Every city I'd go to, they'd have these little water carts. And I was talking to one devotee, and I was saying, what's the use of this? How are they going to make any money with 5? And he said, no, they're making millions. And then I thought, yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people each doing a little bit. You get your thing set up, and then you just make sure it's everywhere. And you got something presentable. And same thing around New York City. If we have nice branding and we get permits everywhere, or find out where legitimate spots by free speech, we can have booths. And if you accompany it with a little Harinam, it's powerful. Out in California, we've been experimenting with our Harinam programs for a long time now. And we have what we call the Kirtan Oasis. And there we have a mini festival. We looked into permits because we find that way we can spread out, and we put up a few booths. And we have one booth called the Mantra Meditation booth, free meditation lesson. And then inside, we have this whole system now where people come in and they put on the headset, and they can hear the teacher, each individual can hear the teacher, and they can also hear themselves, but they can't hear the outside world. And you go in the booth and there's these little electronic candles, and it's decorated inside, and little zafus to sit on. So people come in there and then they take this meditation lesson, the guided meditation, they learn how to do japa. And then there's a few other booths around, and then for the Harinam, it's at night, we have a light show. So when people are on the way to the bar or something, going dancing or something, they come around and they hear the nice tall on the drum and chanting in a light show, and there's food and meditation booth, and they go, yeah, let's skip the bar, we'll stay here. It's more interesting. And in those places, we just stay for hours and people line up at the tables. And we could do that here in New York very easily because, people live here, there, and everywhere. They're out looking for something. So we should make it really attractive. And by the right, use everything high end so that it's really first class. And even if you have 5 of those going, or 2, in any given MSF, lots more devotees will want to come out and be part of it, and they'll feel very safe, and they'll learn how to interact with the public in those circumstances. What do you think? Tell me your new name now.
Brajarani.
Brajarani, what do you think? Because you're a professional, and you're also running one of the major, you're the leader of one of the programs.
I don't think I'm professional at all, but I'm constantly taking notes because we've had 2 events through the Bhakti Center that have been in Washington Square Park with Gauravani and team, and they've been actually really quite lovely. So it really feels like we're just sort of beginning, really been once a month basically since we spoke early this summer. Our next one is next weekend, and And so, yeah, it's really beautiful. And we're working on the whole thing around branding, and that's been my, how to keep it lovely and elevated, and what do we need to do that? So I think hopefully by the end of this winter, this is with Minna and Alex are both on the team, and hopefully by the end of this winter, I think we'll have a good sense of what this branding really looks like, so that we really show up, and everywhere we go, people, whether it's just one table or whether it's a big festival, that it's clear and that it's elevated, and people have a beautiful experience and walk away with a sense of having something lovely. And our last one in Washington Square Park, people just came up, they were like, that was just so, like, it seemed so spiritual and so beautiful, we just wanted to come up and just sort of be a part of it and sit, and so we're, again, experimenting with things, and actually quite excited.
And Yashoda, that's what I see as the future, is more of that, because that's something that the public will come to you. I notice at Rath Yatras, as an example, people walk into the environment and they'll go like, wow, this is fantastic. Like, what can I do to be part of this? Which book should I buy? And you can create a vortex like that. And even if it's tiny, you can do it. If you're branded right, you have the right kind of setup, even a small table with 2 devotees. When it looks very first class and professional, it kind of gives you that edge, It's like, yeah, this is our thing. This is just one outlet for many more around the city. But New York's just begging for it. This city was made for this. They're just waiting for the explosion of these kinds of presentations to happen all over the city. We just have a couple more minutes, but if you have any general questions or comments that you'd like to make, we'll just take 1 or 2 more.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I just, one quick question that we give books and then we leave the place saying that or thinking that like it's between them and Krishna now. But I like to follow up and just see that how they are doing. Especially for Bhagavatam set and like Chaitanya Charitamrita, because if they are taking that many big set, then are they really reading it or they are having any problem? So I do that follow, but is it really, is it something that you recommend?
Yes.
Is it really that?
Yes, it is actually 50% of the equation. We think in terms of our first contact everywhere we go, but taking the time and energy to build in the back end also, like what do people do after they get this, is it's 180 degrees of the equation of the 360. And so yes, it's very, very important to do that. And even minimal efforts on that part, and I think there should be equal efforts at the first presentation and the second and the follow-up, but even minimal efforts on the second half, which is following up with people, have been very successful. That there's ways in which, we've seen people come along as full-time devotees and so forth after buying a set of Bhagavatams because devotees stayed in touch with them. We have a program called GIFT at ISV. It's called Giving in True Friendship or something like that. I forget. I forget exactly what it means, but the fact is there's a team there, and their main objective is to make sure that wherever we make a first contact, and wherever it's possible that we make a second contact and so forth. There's also digital infrastructure, which is vital, because people, when they walk away, then they look and see, where does this connect digitally? They may even do it 2 seconds after they meet you. They'll just look on their smart device and say, who really are these people? And we should be there to show up. I spent the last couple of years working on my own, digital environment, so that there's a place when I meet people, when I give talks and so forth, they have somewhere to go that matches what I just presented, and it's got a follow-up. There's a 21-day challenge, there's a course on meditation they can take, and all these kinds of things are very, very important. And it's worth the trouble to put into it, because the results will speak for themselves.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.